Welcome everyone to a special edition of the Kendall Report. I'm going to be introducing you to my brother Jerry, who has been in the commercial lending business, primarily in multifamily lending, for decades. Because of the shutdown, there are things that are going to occur that we believe will be impactful to a lot of folks, not just multifamily property owners, but individual mortgage holders. Also, we believe the real estate markets are going to be affected substantially. We're trying to get ahead of this, so there will be a series of videos to follow that will help you to understand things you can do to protect yourself, as well as understanding what we're likely to be up against.
The GSEs have agreements with these correspondents for their program, 33, I think, of that are able to issue the bonds. Well, they are responsible for the first 5% of the losses on the top, loss on loans, so they have to have some capital set aside, et cetera. It used to be 10%. It's between 5 and 10% of the first loss. So if you had a $100 million loan and you lose the first $5 million as the guy, right? And then it goes to the bond pool and whoever else. Well, the problem with that is if you look at some of these guys, they have made tens of billions of these loans, from KeyBank to whatever. So they have the first loss on all this stuff. Freddie Mac's done it differently, where they different bonds, so they pass off the risk to different BP buyers and the way they securitize their stuff. But Fannie Mae, really, their correspondents take first loss on this stuff. The banks have got capital in theory to do this with, but when this is your sole business, is being a giant mortgage banker, and you take $100 million hit, you don't have $100 million in assets to back this stuff with. They're going to become insolvent.
So, like, what kind of names are out there on mortgage?
Oh, like a Greystone, Arbor Commercial, like a Grand Bridge, even like a Northmark Capital. They're big. The guys at Berkshire probably have it, but Berkshire Hathaway, which has their group. Well, picture you have $50 billion worth of loans that you originated, and then you had the first loss piece. So 5% of $50 billion, what's that, $2.5 billion? That's assuming everything went bad, but it doesn't mean they go bad even. It means if there's losses and they can't do it. So here's some of the crazy stuff. If you look at different kinds of portfolios, well, the student housing portfolio, they went through, there's $15 billion worth of student housing on the Fannie Mae books. I don't know the exact number. I have it on a thing I listened to earlier. But virtually all of them are vacant now because they sent everybody home. So they're empty. They're empty buildings. So the guy at Walker and Dunlop, which is one of these, okay, Hunt Mortgage is one. Hunt just got purchased by Oryx, which is a Japanese giant financial services company. Red Capital. Okay, but they all going to crumble on them.
All these different components that are going to break.
Yep. So these guys, they're not going to be able to originate loans because they're not going to be able to take more risk on for anything else. And most of these are the master servicer on these deals. So they have special servicers also. So when a loan goes in default, it transfers to a special servicer because then they have the bondholder's interest at stake, not changes the bondholder's stake versus the guys who originated the loan skin the deal. So they're going to try and save for the bondholders. That's where it switches gears. So it's not about the owners. It's not about working out. It's like, how do we protect our bond pool the best we can? And those guys they don't give a shit about anybody.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
It's like, they're like, okay, I don't care. I mean, they're making money.
Right.
they're
Right.
going to get paid at the end of the day.
They're just leeching on everything.
And that's what the special servicers are. I mean, when they come in and take over property, so if let's say you did this forbearance thing, they come in, it's already a 1 to 5% special management fee that gets tacked in right off the top. Nothing gets dispersed. They take in all the money and they disperse all the money. And they don't disperse any money to the holders or to the bondholders either. That stuff all sits in a pool and it gets
What the
off.
irony, like this forbearance, you said that, kind of triggered me back.
Yeah.
This is like not paying your bills for 3 months, and now you're behind, and everything's fucked because there's no way to get caught up again, ever.
The only thing that does it is a capital call. That somebody has to have the capital. And these things, most of the larger Fannie Mae deals, they're all non-recourse. They're all partnership type stuff. They're all funds. They're all kinds of stuff. So there's the REITs. There's partnerships, there's investment funds, there's Delaware statutory trust deals that buy these things using Fannie Mae loans. There's just gazillions of these funds, and they're leveraged to leverage, and then it's just such a twisted, it's derivative stuff where everybody's taken their piece and put it in the deal. And then you transfer all that ownership and responsibility to third parties. It's an absolute train wreck.
What we're talking about here is ultimately the only way to fix everything is to do an Etch-a-Sketch. Turn it upside
Shake
down,
it up.
shake it up.
Yeah.
Draw some new lines. Have to restructure everything.
Yeah, everything's got to be restructured.
And when everything gets restructured, somebody gets fucked. That's the bottom line.
And I can bet you that I'm not a doomsday guy. I'm an optimist all the time. But this is like the S&L crisis. It's that big. That's a different thing on today's scale, but probably bigger because these banks are going to own everything. And if you're going to be a scammer, that was a time before there was a digital world, because you could have defaulted, stole all the money, owned the bank, and disappeared and never got caught. Seriously. Oh, Bob, this seems so scary all of a sudden.
It's
honest to God.
No, I know, man. I know. Like I said, we're sitting here, and this is a bad analogy because you've been on so many cruise ships, but it's like the cruise ship just ran up on ground, and it's starting to tip over.
Yeah,
and
you can't do anything.
And you're just riding it down, and then your next thought is, how much water is this thing going to take in? And am I on the wrong side of the boat?
Exactly. No, you're trying to figure out if it turns upside down, you're fucked because it's a foot-thick steel wall.
Right.
You know? You just go down with the ship. Or it's Poseidon Adventure. You're in the bottom, hitting the bottom of the ship with a pipe, hoping somebody will find you.
No, this is really scary.
Okay, so here's more banking stuff that I just from a different perspective. I don't know if you remember this from 2008 or 9 or any of that. At that time, there was $1.5 trillion in unfunded home equity loans that were outstanding. They have in all these documents now, they have a material adverse condition clause in them. So they can go in and modify them, and they go when they closed everybody's credit lines down so they couldn't advance them and completely insolvent the bank. And the other side of that is that's what all these small business guys use as their funding line for their businesses.
Yeah,
too.
So when they have demands and they got to buy inventory, they use that short term to plug the gap.
Yeah. Even if you're a plumber and you're doing it month to month, that's kind of your back and forth, right?
Yep.
But what happens is they shut it off. Your guys don't pay. Now you're stuck with this thing on your books, and you can't get more money for the next month. That happened big time. That home equity line thing was huge. I've been preaching this about banks. So what happens on small banks? So like banks like First Bank, who are like these pretty good sized $10 billion banks, okay? Well, all these small banks, this is huge, okay, have right of offset clauses in their loan docs.
Right of what?
Offset. Let's say you have a loan with First Bank here in Colorado. They always want you to put 10 to 15% of the loan balance, hold it in it, just keep it in a regular checking account or whatever. You know what they do with the right of offset does in the docs? It allows them to sweep the account and apply it to your loan.
Yeah.
And then you go, I can't make my payment. You took all my money. That's huge. I hadn't seen it. Only time I had 5 clients that did it too last time. And the one that blew me away the most was he was managing property for someone, and his name was on the accounts, and he had loans with them also. They swept the other people's accounts too. So they had to sue him to get the money released back from the other accounts that he had checking accounts for. So these banks, so this is when you go to a typical bank, a small bank, and they have these standardized loan docs. They call them robo-docs, right? They have all these certain clauses in there, and right of offset is one of them. So if you have accounts, and it doesn't have to be related to this business. So let's just, you're kind of slow in your banking, and you just kind of leave it in that account. If you had a loan with them, they can sweep the entire account and offset and use it toward your balance of your loan.
Then everybody's illiquid.
Yep. And then what they do when the things that do, then they call the loans, and you can't get access. And then there's so many properties on the market, and especially you lose price discovery from the values of the properties. That's what happened in 8 and 9. There's no value discovery because there's no buyers. So like all these loans that are out there pending that were all the commercial loans and stuff, like I had to several, is when they issue the loan applications, and Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae have this in there too. Most banks do that, especially if they're mortgage banker-ish somewhere. They had these MAC clauses in there, material adverse change clauses, where they can change the terms or not fund the loan or not do anything if the market becomes too volatile, for example, like it has. So none of those deals are happening unless they're 100. Even if they're committed, they can refuse to fund the loan. That's what everybody did too back then. It's already happened here. I've gotten 3 different emails today from lenders that are not funding their loans. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac won't issue loan applications, term sheets, or anything at this point. They're completely locked up. And then to throw that in, even if you had deals closing, like I think I mentioned, a lot of the county offices aren't even open now to record stuff with, depending where you are. And it goes through the partnerships. Non-recourse debt has a break on that, though. So most of those big loans are non-recourse. But the mom and pop bank stuff is all recourse, so it's debt forgiveness, taxable gain, plus your actual basis. If you sell the property, thing I think is going to be the biggest train wreck in history is the credit unions. They're so invested in, here's what's happened. All these, they participate in these loans. They all have 10, 15%. They'll put 10 credit unions in one deal. Not a freaking person there knows a thing about the real estate or the deal or anything. And none of them have control. There's a lead S&L in each one, and none of them have workout experience. None of them have assets. They just participate in this stuff. He's like, how do we short the credit unions? They're all private. You know, there's got to be a way, because that's where you're going to make the money. If you a temporary fix for the masses,
Yeah.
but I think the underpinnings of the entire thing is just completely disrupted.